Welcome to the program, Seth. I'm really looking forward to chatting to the Treasury Whisperer today.
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here with you and our audience.
I always ask the first question being, how did you come to Treasury and what made you choose Treasury as your career?
Well, I don't know that I chose Treasury. I think it was that Treasury chose me. It kind of interesting. This was way back when I was an IT professional, an IT guy. I was supporting the Treasury function at PepsiCo in New York. And I actually initially was really supporting the accounting and audit functions. And there was an opening. One of our folks that was supporting the Treasury function rolled out to another PepsiCo business unit. And the hunt was on to backfill that person. And I was quite content doing what I was doing and literally got tapped on the shoulder by the head of financial systems and the group manager of financial systems saying, you know, everybody seems to want this Treasury job. How come you're not interested? I said, because I'm content with what I'm doing. I've been in my role for a year. Life is good. And they said, we want you. I was like, okay, well, first you're going to have to tell me a little bit more about Treasury. You know, despite having the MBA, MBA programs, even finance programs, they don't really spend much time talking about the Treasury function. It's this amorphous thing that, so many people don't have any understanding of. So they explained that we talked about cash management and derivatives and all sorts of fun, and interviewed with the Treasury folks themselves, since I would be their support, part of what was, I think, a 3-person team back then. And that was really the beginning of it for me.
Absolutely. And look, just for the listeners, you actually started your career with EY in the IT consulting space.
Right.
And then moved to PepsiCo, as you just mentioned, also in IT, and then made that transition into Treasury on an implementation project, I think it was, to start with, wasn't it? And you spent 7 years there with PepsiCo, and then you moved into a Treasury Ops Manager role to finish off there, and then spent the next 12 years with Praxair and Danone, and GE, of course, before you switched to the banking side with Wells Fargo, where you've been for 11 years, and now you've recently switched across to Synovus to continue your banking journey. Add to that, you're also the newly crowned president of TMANY. So, I mean, with such a fabulous career, what would you say have been the highlights to date?
There's so many. I think I would probably start with the GE experience, because I've often said that there's probably been no better place on the planet to practice Treasury than at GE. Just the size and scope of the operation there, the global nature of it, the constant striving for excellence and almost a continuous transformation that goes on. It was just an incredible place to get, very, very deep in the subject matter. So no matter what you were doing, you were going to know more doing it at GE than you would anywhere else, because there was just such variability of things that would happen on the cash side and the FX side, the debt and derivative side. It was a world-class organization. I would often joke, as we embarked on a number of initiatives with the SWIFT network, that we were the poster children for SWIFT for corporates back in the day. And it was great being part of those project teams to be able to stand up connectivity between the Treasury workstation and the SWIFT network direct to go to the banks. And so that was a huge set of accomplishments for the things that we did. So I would say that the whole GE experience was something rather spectacular. Now, don't get me wrong; they take every ounce of blood out of you that they possibly can. But honestly, I think it was totally worth it. I think another milestone was honestly making the move over to banking. I had become so enamored of the payment space while at GE that, I knew during the last few years that I was there that my next move was going to be banking. And it was really a question of when and where. And that was a delicate balance too, because, in many instances, I couldn't go to work for some of our relationship banks. It just really would have been a relationship issue. So I had to pick and choose where the spots were. And it just, it happened as, a result of, number one, networking. And number two, the right opportunity at the right time at Wells Fargo to jump in as part of their massive project to integrate their acquisition, their merger with Wachovia. So that was that move was really very much a highlight as well.
I just want to touch on the first one there, the GE experience. As my listeners know, I've been a big advocate of GE is just such a good breeding ground for future leaders in Treasury. And I saw your post recently that said GE is also a breeding ground for technology innovators, which was interesting as well. But yeah, I'm a big fan. I think that it's such a good breeding ground. So I totally agree with what you said there. And just touching on the second one, I get asked a lot about moving from corporate to banking or banking to corporate. What advice would you have for listeners about making that switch? Because they are very different roles, aren't they?
It's a very different role. It's a very different mindset as well. And I think the thing that I carried with me to this day is still having that practitioner's mindset of what our customers want. And you can't take away from me all those years of being sold to, all those years of using the solutions and services that were provided to me by banks. So I always have that very top of mind when I'm looking at either developing a product or partnering with another firm. What's that experience going to be like? Because I want it to be better than the experiences so often that I had. But I think the biggest piece of advice to give people if you're contemplating going either direction and hopping over that fence is to just go in eyes wide open. It's the companies work and operate very differently. Unless you're jumping over the fence to do the exact kind of work you did, let's say in corporate treasury, then if you're moving to a corporate treasury role in a bank, that's very different from, let's say, going into a treasury management product or sales role. And it's a very different world. It takes a while to get acclimated to the differences. It's much bigger than I think people realize.
And that's the sales nature versus the practitioner doer mentality, isn't it?
Yes. It was funny, after so many years of being able to get literally my hands dirty on the technology at GE, whether it was our treasury management system or Swift and, testing payments as we're rolling them out around the world. I got to Wells and, trying to, touch, the Wells CEO portal versus what was the Wachovia connection portal. Other than a demo, I couldn't touch these. I couldn't develop the internal or the expertise to understand the differences between the platforms. And not being able to get hands-on, I found very frustrating. But to the other side of it, I learned how you can actually develop that expertise without having to get into the nitty-gritty and having to, touch the keys and the mouse and actually have the full customer experience. And it shocked me when I came to the realization that, it can work without actually having to really do it.
Definitely. And I just want to go right back to the start for you. You obviously started in IT consulting. How did you find the transition to go from IT into corporate treasury?
Actually pretty smooth, because it happened in the same company. It happened while I was at Pepsi. So, having, initially supporting the treasury function, I was still in IT. Although, as I recall, my office was actually situated in the Treasury Department, which was nice. We were the Treasury support team was one of the rare teams that actually sat within their client department. But when I literally went from IT into Treasury operations, it seemed like a very natural progression, because I'd already been in that culture on a day-to-day basis because I was situated there. What it did, though, I think the biggest change for me was realizing it was no longer just about the technology. It was about, what does this really mean? What's the issue when a commercial paper issuance doesn't get into the system the way you thought it would, the way you thought it should. It was, you're actually making daily investment decisions. You didn't have to worry about that in IT. As long as the system was up and it did what was expected, everything was fine. But being able to get the nuances of what does that mean, and why do we negotiate with banks, and what's the fee structure? There was so much to learn, and frankly, at this point, looking back, I realized that was a start of a journey in continuous learning. And so it pushed me to have to continually stay up, not just on the technology side, but on the business of Treasury. And, like I said, that's something that I've taken with me to this day.
Now, we mentioned as well, you're the new president of TMANY. So for those that don't know, that's the Treasury Management Association of New York. Talk us through what exciting developments you've got and things in store for that presidency.
Absolutely. Well, it's an exciting time here as we're, unfortunately still in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, we were faced with the situation of, a 3-day in-person conference that this organization has been doing for, at that point, it would have been our 38th event. We didn't know whether or not we were going to be able to do this in person. It certainly, as we were starting to do the planning in January and February of last year, and the pandemic was just in its infancy. We were kind of holding out hope that we'd still be able to do it. When it became radically clear to us that there was no way we were doing an in-person event, the hotels were shut down. We knew there was no way you were going to get people to go to a hotel, wander around in mass at a conference when we were looking in last March and April. We decided, let's pivot and let's try to do this on a webinar. And so we were the first AFP, Association for Financial Professionals chapter. We still call ourselves TMA, dating back to the old Treasury Management Association days. We were the first ones to pivot and to try to do a webinar-based virtual event. And so we did the same 3 days, but we did them all on Zoom. We limited our content down to 4 or 5 sessions a day. And you know what? The sponsors came, the people came, and it was a great learning exercise for all of us, as well as a lot of people in the industry. So for 2021, we're looking at not only replicating that event for this year in June, and by the way, it'll be June 15th, 16th, and 17th, and it will be completely virtual. A lot of talk in the industry about hybrid events. For the June timeframe, I don't know that we'll be ready for a hybrid event, so we're going to continue to be all virtual. And, just trying to up the game a little bit from what we did last year. It was very experimental. So I think the challenge a lot of organizations are having is, what's the right platform? Is Zoom really the way to do it? Can you do concurrent sessions? We haven't gotten our plans completely there yet. But part of the reason is that we decided to do some collaboration with other AFP chapters in the Northeast. And so we have another event that's happening on February 3rd, brand new event. We're calling it the Treasury Innovation Northeast Symposium. And it's a 1-day event. It's an awards program. We're looking to recognize 3 I call them superheroes of innovation in Treasury that have done some amazing things in the past year. And so we're literally gonna give out gold, silver, and bronze recognition and have those organizations tell their story of what they did. The finalists right now are, the nominations are being reviewed by, we have a team of impartial judges, and we'll be making some announcements shortly, and then those folks will get to present, and then we've kind of bookended the event with a pair of keynote speakers talking about innovation. So kind of going back to the GE roots a little bit, and particularly the IT side, Steve Rollo, who's a CIO in GE Capital and a number of the other financial functions at GE. We're gonna do a fireside chat with Steve, talking about his innovation and transformation strategies and approach at GE. And then we're also gonna pull from the world of fintech. So Finicity, which is now owned by MasterCard, is one of those account aggregator entities. The co-founder and chief innovation officer, Nick Thomas, is going to join us for a second keynote that day. So it's going to be a package of sessions between the award winners, the keynotes, and we're even adding content as we speak for the breaks. So there won't really be a break. So our innovation is that we're literally going to run this event not as a series of separate webinars, but we're going to do it as if it's broadcast. We're going to go straight from the morning, straight through to the afternoon, and we're even having a quote unquote after party that's going to be a Zoom networking after party to allow people to meet and mingle in breakout rooms. And we're going to shift up the breakout rooms every 15 minutes, giving people ample opportunity to meet other people that are attending or speaking or sponsoring the event. So lot of fun stuff on the agenda for this year for TMANY.
And that segues quite well into, networking obviously is a massive part of those conferences. What's been your approach to networking over your career, Seth?
I got to tell you, Simon, I don't think back in my Pepsi days or EY days, I had any ideas to really what networking was. I got a large dose of networking when I was the treasurer of Danone Waters, which was the Dannon and Evian water business here in Connecticut. And we went through a merger. Everything moved out to California. I opted not to go. And this was the summer right before 9/11. Unbeknownst to me, it led to a 14-month layover on the bench, trying to get back to work until I eventually did land at GE. During that time, I spent every day, it was exercise in the morning, and it was on the phone, on email. It was obvious that posting for jobs on back then monster.com and other job sites that were in vogue back then was not the way anybody was going to really get jobs, not at more senior levels. So you hit the phones, you hit the email, and it was who can you talk to, who can you tell your story, what is your story? And literally, just to keep straight all the conversations I was having, I started using Outlook to keep track of all the conversations I was having, to know when I spoke to someone, what we talked about, family information. Outlook became my CRM system, so to speak. And it was during that time that I guess I just kind of figured it out. I figured out that sometimes the best people to network with were people that didn't necessarily have a great relationship once upon a time. Tried to get under every rock that was out there, and to be able to let people know, hey, I'm in the market, I'm looking, this is what I'm looking for. Who do you know? Who should I be talking to? And I think by the end of 14 months, I think I had it figured out. And the most important thing that I figured out was that you can't stop, because you never know when you're going to need that network, whether it's for a job, whether it's for a health concern, whether it's to help other people. And so it's become something. It's just, I would say it's in my DNA to constantly be networking, and more often than not, it's not for my benefit. It's, I'm looking to help other people. I like to try to help place people. I like to see where there may be synergies that we may have. I truly believe that, you don't necessarily know why you meet certain people in this life, but there's usually a reason. Sometimes you find out, other times you don't. Sometimes it's for them, sometimes it's for you. You have no idea. So to me, every single conversation is really important.
And have mentors played any part in that journey?
Most definitely. I've been very fortunate. I've had a number of mentors over the years. There was a professor during my MBA days in graduate school who was very much a mentor. Actually, one of the most influential people in my life was a manager I worked for in my EY days. And, as it turned out, he was the person to help me get my foot in the door at PepsiCo. He was the one who was living in Stamford, Connecticut, and jokingly said to me and my fiance at the time, why don't you young folk come out to the country in Connecticut and take a look at some real estate? And while we didn't do anything right then and there, it planted a seed about a community that we really didn't know about. And lo and behold, we've been in Stamford, Connecticut now for 28 years. So, he was wonderful. The director of cash management who took me in at PepsiCo, the IT guy to run treasury operations, she was an amazing manager who actually, we talked about transitioning from bank to corporate. She had done that. She had been a banker and she moved over to the treasury side, and she was fantastic. Learned so much from her. And there have been so many others. I mean, Paul Burstein, who I worked for many years at GE, may he rest in peace. He was kind of hybrid mentor, father figure, manager, all rolled up in one. I've forgotten more things than most people probably have known about cash management that Paul alone taught me. So there have been numerous people like that. And these days, I feel like I've got a number of mentors that play different roles for me. I have I like the concept of having a personal board of directors. And so, certainly as I, was looking at the transition between Wells Fargo and Synovus, there were a number of those people who I counted on to, be able to provide me with varieties of different kinds of guidance.
Seth, you've worked across a number of different areas. What's the one piece of advice that you wish you had have known back when you started your career that you want to pass on to the listeners?
It's interesting. I had a conversation earlier today with someone who's actually going to be one of our TMANY innovation event at the break speakers, and we were talking about how can you innovate if you don't have work-life balance and you don't have a number of things kind of figured out. And in the course of talking, one of the things that came up was focusing in on your strengths. And I think the thing that so many of us, you think about the performance review process, so often, no matter how good you are, the focus is, what are your developmental areas? What training do we need to do? What kind of coaching do you need? And it's always about the things that you are weakest at. And I think what I wish I knew years ago was, don't worry about what you can't do or what you're not that good at. Focus on the areas where you're an 8, a 9, a 10, the strengths that you have, and really focus in on those areas and hone those skills and make those skills as strong as you possibly can.
Seth, what about when you're recruiting? What are the key things you look for in your direct reports?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing is, number one, I want someone who's smarter than me. I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room or accused of being that. The second thing is, I always want to hire someone with a vision of where they can be, not in the job that I have on offer today, but where can they be in the job beyond that. And while a lot of times you may find what looks like a great candidate for today's opening, they may not be a great candidate for what comes next. So being able to find someone that, where you can already see what the trajectory might be for them, that gives me assurances that it's someone who's right on the money. There's one other nuance, and I learned this, early on when I was a young manager. Don't let other people kind of force your hand at who to hire. I've learned that the gut instinct more often than not is right, and you need to trust yourself. And I paid the price in some situations by having to kind of give in to someone I worked for who thought a candidate that I wasn't that high on was really the right fit. You got to go with your gut. If it's not right, move on to the next person.
It's interesting that you say that, Seth, because a lot of people ask me this question in the job I do, and that's exactly my answer. It's, what makes you good at doing it? It's going with your gut feeling. Like, your gut feeling is always right, and there's no science behind that. It is an instinct. So I totally agree with that. I think it's really good advice to people. What do you think makes a successful treasurer in the eyes of the CFO, the CEO, the board?
Today's treasurer has to be nimble enough to wear a lot of different hats. They need to be not only tuned into what's going on within their treasury organization, but really much more broadly across the entire financial enterprise. And if you think about the role that treasury organizations have, whether it's forecasting, whether it's looking at what the debt structures need to be, the capital structures need to be, really having a broader understanding of what's going on across finance and out into the different aspects of the business. So especially as you look at a multi-divisional organization, being able to have the pulse of not only what's going on in corporate, but really what's going on out in the divisions. Treasury is often, has got its ear to it because of the payments and the flows of cash and the cash flow itself. And having an astute sense about the working capital at different, levels of the organization really makes the treasurer honed in on everything that's going on in the organization. And what I've observed over the last couple of years, and I've talked about this a lot, is that there's very much this, I call it this BFF factor between many CFOs and treasurers. So, the CFOs are counting on the treasurer for more and more today. So that interdisciplinary capability, the ability to manage a lot of those large enterprise projects. You don't always necessarily think of the treasurer as the guy who's going to run with the ERP implementation, but they may have more insight into what's going on out in the field than the controller is, who tends to be usually much more internally focused and on the controls right there at the corporate layer. So, I think there needs to be a lot of hats. And, frankly, I think one of those hats as well, and this goes for the CFOs as well, is the technology side. If you're not staying current with what's going on inside your company and inside your industry, you're falling behind. And, I find a lot of treasurers who may say, not really a technology guy, but they're always looking to learn and to know what's going on. And they're tapping into the resources that are out there, whether it's consulting firms, the bankers, or other industry specialists, to make sure that they've got a good handle on it.
You've just stolen my last question for you around technology, Seth. So thank you very much for that. Look, it's been a pleasure chatting today. Really enjoyed it, and look forward to chatting again sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Simon. I appreciate it as well.